are you seeing the most amount of opportunity for investors out there?
So look, I think what's important to note is I see the investor inquiry that comes through my office. I obviously don't necessarily see like all investor inquiry from different areas or anything, but what I'm finding more specifically is what kind of properties the investors are inquiring about. So in my area, I'm getting a lot of, basically if I search the word investor in my email, basically every inquiry is basically on a duplex in my region. So all the investor inquiries are coming through for our duplexes or duplex sites. We do also get quite a few for a house where they might have granny flat potential. So whilst we cover quite a large area, as obviously it's predominantly that Canterbury Bankstown region, but all those river suburbs that go like Picnic Point, East Hills, Padstow Heights, and then we've got the Panania and Revesby. Those are the main areas that I cover, and it's all duplexes in that area. That's what people are inquiring about.
And how does it go for like renting those type of assets? I know that like, in some of the more regional markets that investors go ahead and purchase in, it's like, oh, I don't know about getting a duplex. It's not as desirable. It's not the type of asset that these people buy. How is that reflected in Sydney, do you think? People are okay with the duplex?
There's such high demand for it. So these properties are also getting quite good prices. A new duplex is being built all the time, but there's so much rental demand that it's okay. Like most of our duplexes at the moment are going on the market and at more than $900 per week. And they're usually leasing in the space of, they're usually done by the first open house.
Wow.
And we even have a handful that make it up to the $1,500 per week mark.
What are some tips for property, like tenants, right? Our investors might be rent investors, and they still have to rent a house if they want to invest, and they can't afford to buy a PPOR in Sydney, but they want to buy an investment. What are some of the tips have you got to secure a good rental? Have you got any tips and tricks for the vendor
from a tenant's perspective?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, definitely. So I think first of all, being organised and actually submitting your application the second you've seen a property, or even sometimes in advance of seeing a property. I think as well, making sure that your references know to respond to the agent who's doing the reference checks. I think that a lot of people miss out simply because their references are unreliable. A lot of property managers use like automated software nowadays to do their reference check-in. So like with us, the second someone submits an app, an email goes to their employer, an email goes to their property manager. If the employer is not the right, like if it gets sent to like a HR department, well, they might not reply for like 2-3 days. Property's leased. Like we're leasing properties straight away. Making sure that your references are responsive. Also making sure I'm a fan of people doing a bit of a cover letter or a pet resume if they've got pets, because, pets is a bit of a...
What's a pet resume?
A pet resume. So it's what it sounds like. It's a resume for your pet. They usually put a little photo in the corner. They talk about if it's gone to dog school and it's
if it has an Instagram page,
trained, if it's inside or outside pet.
Wow.
Even how different breeds of dogs will, some have different personality or traits or whatever. But we see a few pet resumes, and then even people talking about how often they walk their dog. It really can. If you've got an owner who's really let's put it this way, not everyone knows that much about pets. I am a dog person personally, but I don't necessarily think that all properties are suitable for pets. So I want to make that clear that whilst I'm a pet friendly person, I know that all properties suit pets. But if I call an owner and go, yeah, tenant's got a dog, blah, 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 is it inside or outside? Oh, I don't know. Not having that information, an owner's more likely to decline it. Whereas if you've got that information that actually this is a large breed, it's outside, it's well trained, maybe it's a seeing eye dog, having the correct information, which you can get from a pet resume if a tenant creates it, can get you over the line for an owner or a property manager who may not know that much about your pet.
Well, and to me, what it points to, what it shows is that regardless of whether you're a landlord or whether you're a tenant, it shows that you've actually gone to the effort. Like whether all the information, like of course we encourage people to be honest and upfront and all that sort of thing. But whether if you've gone to the effort of doing that, it shows that you're conscientious. At least in my book, like if you can sort of Otherwise, if you're going to turn up to a job interview, and your resume sort of it's got spelling mistakes in it, for example, or if you don't have a resume or something like that, straight away you're gonna get thrown in. You're not even going to get an interview in the first place. So that's what I suppose it talks to.
Yeah, 100%. That's any other kind of hot tips for tenants to?
Something I see a lot of that people should be mindful of is obviously my tip should be for investors. It's something that I look at for my landlords is if you send over a bank statement, make sure it's not going into debit. And make sure it doesn't say the local pub or club and hundreds of dollars to show that you've got a gambling problem. Something that I think lacks in the Southwest is a lot of agents don't necessarily appropriately advertise properties. I think if they spend a bit more time advertising and marketing the properties with good quality photography and things like that, and more strategic with their pricing, because I've got a little bit of a strategy I use, then I think properties would actually be on the market for less time. I see a lot of properties.
Could you share that strategy? Like what is the strategy?
Share the magic.
Yeah. Okay. So you know how I said before, if you jump on realestate.com and you pretend to be a tenant, you put in your budget. And in Southwest Sydney, a lot of people are working to a budget. It's the affordable area of Sydney. And you'll notice that there's price increments that you can put your budget in. So it'll be like, $500, $525, $550, $575. There's $25 increments. So I always appraise a property within one of those increments. So let's just say I've appraised a property, I'll say $550 to $575. Right. I chuck it on the market at $575 per week, and I prepare my landlords that if it doesn't go first open, you go to the next price increment. None of this $5 or $10 price drop crap. Go to the next increment, and these tenants are like, "Oh, there's a new property on the market,
new listing."
There you go.
And I generally lease all of my properties by the second open. Like a lot of them are going first, but I'm generally leasing them by the first or the second. And I think that if you don't use that strategy, a lot of other agents are just going, "Oh yeah, we'll just do a $10 drop," because they're too scared to be like honest with their client. Half the time it's because they overprice it in the first place, but don't get me started. But, just be honest with the client, and they're afraid. So they only do $10 increment drops, and that's not going to get you a new group of tenants seeing your property.
Yeah, that's such a great idea. Actually, what are some great questions to ask a property manager to find out if they're going to help you as an investor?
I don't think I've been asked that question before.
There we go.
Actually something that happened the other day that I thought was quite interesting is, and I listened to Ashley Goodchild's webinar thing
she
the
ran
other
a live
day.
session, didn't she? Yeah.
And
Monday night.
She made something that she made a comment about was how often she'll do like a final inspection for a purchaser. Now, that's something that doesn't necessarily happen a lot in Sydney, because a lot of the people who buy in Sydney are from Sydney, whereas a lot of people who are buying in Perth are from interstate. And I had a husband and wife were sort of, the husband was meant to organise the final and he didn't. And then the wife called me and asked me to do the final for her. And the husband came in and he apologized. He said, "I'm so sorry. It was so inappropriate that we asked you to do the final inspection." And I said, no, like, it's fine. I don't mind doing your final inspection. He thought that no property managers did that. And the thing is, in some states, I guess it might be a bit more common, like in Perth, where the investors are in a different city. In Sydney, it's probably not that common. So maybe that might be a good intro question that, hey, I'm looking to buy an investment. This is what I'm looking at. If I send you a link, would you mind giving me an appraisal? One, that's something that not all property managers do. Two, if I'm unavailable, would you be willing to do that final inspection for me? Those two key things, there is not many property managers in Sydney who'll do that. But to be fair, I don't get asked often. And if someone asked me that question, I would say, look, I don't get asked to do it often, but I'm happy to do it. For that client who couldn't make it to the final, I went through and I filmed a video. I pointed out all the things that need to happen before the property could be leased. I gave them their rental appraisal, and I'd given them a rental appraisal before I even seen the property based on the advertisement anyway. But yeah, I think that's not something that happens in Sydney a lot. So if you wanted to find an investor-focused property manager, asking them to appraise off a link and asking them to do a final inspection might help weed out a few people. Even if you don't plan to use them for the final, just asking if they'll do it.
Yeah, yeah, actually, yeah. What's their willingness? What's their willingness to do it?
So I'm actually doing it. Yeah, interesting.
And it's just showing like that you go over and above, really, in a sense. Like it's maybe not weeding out particularly the investor focused. Another question would be, judging by that link of the property that I'm planning to purchase, is there anything else I could do to get higher rent? And that's something, those are things that I focus on in my investor support service is when they send me a link, I tell them the pros and cons of the property. And I might say, look, I noticed the property's got tired carpet. I recommend changing that to be a timber look flooring. I noticed the property doesn't have aircon. I recommend putting aircon in. The property doesn't have built-ins. I recommend putting those in. So I'll also let investors know about things they may not realize they have to maintain in a property. So if they sent me a link to a property with a pool, when you look at that contract, make sure it's got a certificate of the pool compliance in it. Because in New South Wales, you can sell a property with a certificate of compliance or a certificate of non-compliance, but you can't lease it unless the pool's compliant. So making sure that it's a certificate of compliance in the sales contract, and even making sure that there's a certificate of the registration of the pool in the sales contract as well. I've seen that not happen before.
Wow. And that's a great little testing the property manager of like, what do you think of pools? And what should I do if I've got a pool? And then if they just say what you've said, great. Okay, cool. You understand what you're talking about. And if they don't, then you might be best looking at another one. What are some of the mistakes that you see investors making with their tenants? Because it's so easy just to say, well, I'm this and you need to do this.
I'm the big boss person.
I'm the big boss.
We are seeing a lot of those high increases at the moment, which look, I support a proactive rent increase. I very much support a proactive rent increase. But we're doing these huge jumps. Like everyone's so financially stressed at the moment. Everyone is. I'm more of a fan of a slow and steady wins the race than, hey, let's jack the rent up so high that your tenant hates you. They're going to probably report a bunch of repairs that weren't even necessary just to get back at you, or they're going to vacate. By the time you've got a 2-week vacancy period and paid a letting fee, was it even worth it? It probably would have been better to be negotiable and keep the good tenant in there. I think that's a big thing, is that doing these huge rent increases at the moment. And some are warranted, some aren't. Like I am seeing rent increases that are like landlords are asking us to go beyond market value some of the time. And we say, we don't recommend it. And it's just like, tough, I pay you, do it for me. And I just think, all right, well, when your tenant goes, don't be sad that you can't achieve the price I just told you can't get. So that's a mistake I do see. Probably another big mistake I see is landlords, and this may not happen as much in other states, but once again, in Sydney, a lot of our landlords also live in Sydney. In fact, a lot of my clients live within a 15-minute drive of me. A lot of people who want to do their own repairs to save a buck. But then try and actually get them out there because like we're in like Sydney siders, they're time poor, like trying to get someone out to the property to do their own repair. And even just like delaying the inevitable, like if you can you get me 5 quotes or can you get me 3 quotes or something like that? the tradespeople who are on my books, if they were expensive, I wouldn't use them because everyone would complain about them. I already have reliable, well-priced trades on my books. So let's just go ahead with the first quote, which is probably going to be the cheapest, rather than delay the process by 2-3 weeks and upset your tenant and then have them get frustrated the next time you go to increase the rent because you're so slow with your repairs. So that's another mistake I see. Landlords just trying to do their own repairs or, trying to get multiple quotes just to save a buck. And particularly during a vacancy period, I got talking to one guy who was doing all his own renovations, which, that saves you a lot of money. I guess it sounds like a good idea until it takes you 6 months and you could have just done it in one. And then you've lost on all that rent, not to mention not having invoices for tax purposes.
Yeah, you've just got the Bunnings couple of $1,000, but all that time, energy, and effort, and you can't do much with the tax. That's a really good point.
This Kushal asked this question twice, so I think for his tenacity and persistence, we have to answer it. Just an interesting one as well. That's because I was not necessarily proud of this, but we didn't have it. It wasn't me, but it was somebody else I knew, and we may or may not have mentioned there was a cat.
With Steph.
Yeah. So yeah, what happens in that situation if you were to find that? What do you do then?
So what does it say? A tenant lease is without a pet and then goes and gets a pet after securing the property. What do you do? Kick him out? Oh God!
They go and get one after. Yeah, they get one.
Yeah.
They didn't have one at the start.
It's a very mature
I guess
dog.
I feel like there's okay. So is it that we've just approved the property and then the tenant before they move in says, "Oh, by the way, I have a pet," because that happens. They literally say it before they even sign the lease. They pay the deposit, then they tell you. And sometimes someone will be living in the property for 3 months. You go do the inspection and then you go, "Oh, hello, there's a pet here." When that happens, I guess I think a lot of landlords get really hung up on the dishonesty factor of it. And the truth is, if we can empathize with tenants a little bit, it's hard to find a property if you've got a pet. If we had called you proactively and said, "Hey, I have an application for you. It's, mum, dad, 2 children, and they have a dog," some owners would have actually approved them anyway, but they just want to kick them out because they're hung up on this idea that they got a pet dishonestly. So if we can just put the dishonesty part to one side for a moment, because we need to empathize that tenants are scared. Like they are scared. We're in a rental crisis. So take the dishonesty part out. It might make me a little bit irritated too, but let's assess the situation as a whole. Would you have leased to these people if you knew they had a pet? And then it's a matter of going, what kind of pet is it? Let's assume for this it's a dog. Is the dog coming inside going to be very problematic to the kind of property you have? If you've got a property that's carpeted, then you might think, nah, dogs are a no-go. It's going to just make the house stink. But if you've got a property that's tiled throughout or, floors that are less likely to get scratched or anything like that, then why do you necessarily care about there being a dog in the property? Are they a great tenant? Do they keep it clean and tidy? Do they pay their rent on time? Are they, is the rent good? Like the figure good? Do they report like an unnecessary amount of repairs? Are they difficult to deal with? There's a whole thing that we need to assess before you go, "I'm going to kick a tenant out just because they have a dog." Like your property might be appropriate. You might have approved it anyway. And then, if you do find that they had a dog without permission, maybe at a routine inspection, it's a matter of maybe just saying, "Okay, well, I'm going to get you to sign a pet agreement." Now, in New South Wales, you can't ask for carpet to be steam cleaned unless there's been a pet. So you would put that clause in there. You also can ask for there to be a pest control conducted at the end of a tenancy. If they've got a pet, you would put that agreement in place. You'd get the tenant to sign this agreement. You might even put other stipulations in there, such as the dog is not permitted inside, or maybe that the dog is not permitted on carpeted areas, or whatever it might be. You might have other stipulations, but I don't think it's worth terminating a tenancy from the get-go just on the fact they've got a dog. Let's reassess the whole thing.
Well, can you make them sign this magical agreement to let you have a pet? Like, can you actually make them do that?
Say sign it or I'm terminating this tenancy because it's a breach of lease. If you didn't give them consent to have a
breaching
pet,
a contract.
Yeah, they're in breach and you can terminate. And, you know, getting them to sign an agreement doesn't have to be that hard. You know, I use software where I literally type an agreement and it's sent to them in text and they just have to click the link and go, okay, and then sign it with their fingertip. Like they can sign an agreement in 30 seconds.
Yeah. And have you seen, like, a pet's such a bad thing? Like, are they such a terrible little nightmare?
Bad tenants are a bad thing. You can have a bad tenant without a pet and you can have a good tenant with a pet. They're not necessarily a bad thing. There is the right pet for the right property.
Where do you sort of see the rental sort of situation going over the next, I won't say 3 years because that's just too long a period, but over the next sort of 3 to 6 to 9 months, are you seeing listings, just sort of rental listings, continue to go down? Or is that where you're sort of thinking it may go? What do you?
Yeah. So look, I obviously monitor my own local market. I monitor it daily. This time last year, there was about 100. So the 4 main postcodes I usually monitor. There was 100 properties on the market at any one time this time last year. Right now, I think when I checked just before I came down, there was 49. So that's like the available properties has halved. Now, don't get me wrong. There's going to be another duplex on the market tomorrow, and there's going to be another duplex on the market tomorrow after that. But just the demand isn't stopping. And post-COVID, so many investors in this area sold because the prices got very nice for our investors who have potentially held their properties for a long time. We saw a lot of investors leave the market. Those properties were purchased by owner-occupiers. We need investment properties. There is so much rental demand, and whether you're looking to buy to live in the area or buy to live in the area, or you want to rent in the area, there is demand either way. Like there is people like the southwest of Sydney. You know, in Canterbury Bankstown, it's such a central location. It's like half an hour to the beach. It's half an hour to the city. It's half an hour to Parramatta. It's such a central location that
it's got some great amenities as well. Like heaps of like Bankstown Centrals, like the shopping's is huge these days, and you got all those kind of markets around there as well. Like I think there's some.
Like there's Westfields in Liverpool, there's Westfields in Miranda, there's major shopping centres, Narella and Macarthur and Campbelltown. Like families will always flock here. There will always be demand for a family home. And I think that's important to point out that it's the family homes that I'm seeing a huge amount of demand in. Don't get me wrong, there's always going to be markets for 2-bedroom properties and the more affordable as well. But I think family home, you just can't go wrong. And I know that a lot of the investors in your page, they're going to be wanting to potentially look at land. So family homes, you just, there's always going to be rental demand because migration is always going to come through Sydney. So I just, you know, right now, if I speak to a lot of investors on the phone before they've purchased for my investor support service. And if I speak to all of them, a lot of them are saying the only reason they're holding off is interest rates. So as soon as everyone feels comfortable with interest rates again, everyone's just going to start buying. I do foresee prices going back up for sale because there's like the only thing stopping them is interest rates. And it's just because they're scared of the unknown. Once it's known, everyone will be comfortable again.